Hi there, welcome to Floating in Books. Today I have a book review for you, a wrap up of all of the books I read recently. Welcome to everybody watching today. Thank you so very much for joining me. I have been promising you I would do a wrap up as soon as I had finished 2 more books, and I finally did. So that's why I'm coming to you with the 5 physical copies and 1 audiobook that I finished since I last did a wrap up. So let me get to the audiobook first because I have the other ones all as physical copies. I'm currently still in the midst of another audiobook. I have about 7 hours left. But since audiobooks is something I do in the morning when I get ready, and sometimes I just forget to play one. So, and the one that I had selected was like a 16-hour audiobook. So it was a bit of a longer one. So that's what I'm currently in the midst of. But I'll just update you on that one as we are getting to a new wrap up after this. I listened to The Gentleman's Guide to Vice and Virtue by Mackenzi Lee, and this is something I spotted on my Storytel app, and I was like, you know what, I could listen to that. It sounds like fun. I had heard a lot of people talking very positively about this book back when this first launched a couple of years ago, and I can see why a lot of people on BookTube and also BookTok might like a book like this, but I have come to the conclusion a very long time ago that the things that are popular in the online bookish sphere and the things that I like in terms of what I would like to read do not always align. And I definitely think that when it comes to these kind of books, there's definitely something trending going on. By the way, if the lighting is very dark, I do apologize, but I'm filming this at the end of the day, so I'm trying to squeeze it out in like the last minutes of daytime that I still have left. I've tried to make it as bright as I possibly can, so I do apologize. But yeah, this book is about a guy who's supposed to go on his grand tour of Europe, which is something that a lot of well-to-do young men would do as part of their like coming of age before they would return to England to run their estates and live a gentleman's life. And our main character, I already forgot his name because it's been a while since I listened to it, has got a bit of a reputation, and he also happens to be in love with his best friend. And that is, of course, not something that is readily accepted. He is sent on this grand tour with his best friend, as well as his sister, who he cannot stand, and a chaperone. And he is very much opposed to the way his father has decided this grand tour should be, because his expectation was, I'm just going to go off in Europe for a year with my best friend, and then we're each going to go our own ways, but we're going to living it up, and we're going to have a lot of fun. Turns out his dad has different ideas at the start of the story, and he starts this journey being very sad about what his dad has in stores for him, because it's supposed to be like this educational trip with like cultural experiences which he cannot stand. As the story progresses, it very easily becomes known to us that the story is going to advance in a very much more unexpected way than any of our characters had thought of before. We get to know our characters in a very different way, and I definitely can see why a lot of people would enjoy this. It's definitely a very enjoyable story, and I think that enjoyable stories are as much part of the bookish sphere as possible. However, in terms of like historical accuracy, and it was a little too sensational for my tastes. There is a point in the story where they encounter like thieves on the road and pirates, and there's all these super exciting things that are happening, but so many of the plot is so unbelievable, and like it's very much sort of like a historical novel if it were set in 2023. It's very, very much that. And I definitely think that that's, you know, a lot of people want like to be have stories that are more inclusive and that do all of these things, but I do feel we therefore get a misrepresentation of what the historical reality actually was. And therefore I thought this story was, you know, in terms of like an entertaining story, if that's all you're looking for, then definitely this, but I feel that there just should be a note that the author has taken a lot of creative leeway when it comes to the way the period has been represented. Because apart from the fact that this group of people is going on a grand tour of Europe, there is very little that is true to the period. It just feels very much like a lot of periods have been thrown in together. Let me grab a light, because I do have a light. I've grabbed a light because we became very, very dark. And I think this is a little bit better. I do apologize for all the shadows in the background, but we're rolling with it. I should have another light that shines this way. Next time. So this story was very enjoyable, but I don't think it's necessarily very historically accurate, which is not the point of the story, I think. However, I am someone who really enjoys historical fiction if it's like more true to the actual period than this was. So from a very entertaining kind of perspective, yes, it was a very easy read. In terms of historical accuracy, which is what I want from a historical novel myself, this wasn't it for me. So for me, this was only a 2-star, but I can see why a lot of people would enjoy this. Going in chronological order in which I've read it, this is The Running Grave, which is the latest novel by Robert Galbraith. There are, of course, scores of people who've decided to no longer read anything by J.K. Rowling. I have decided that I'm just invested in this series from way before, which is why I keep reading these, because as far as detective novels goes, she just really writes some really good ones. This is not one of the better ones in the series, though, I have to say. However, a lot of the critique that she was hit with when some of the previous novels have been released was very much done by people who had not read the stories. Whereas I feel that if you were to actually read the stories, it's not as terrible as some people make them out to be. In this story, we get the insights of a cult that has settled in the English countryside, and one of the team from Cormoran Strike, who is the main detective we're following in these stories, becomes embedded in this cult. And then it's about, for one, getting her out again and sort of like the brainwashing that's going on. But in the end, the murder case that was tied to this was a little bit weak. And what these books all have is an unexpected spin towards the end. And for a 1,000-page book, because that's how many pages we're talking, this book ended up having the twist very late in the story, and then it wrapped up incredibly quickly. So I'm not going to give away too much about this. I think this storyline gives you a really good idea of what it is about. But these stories don't just have the detective case. We also have like a will they, won't they kind of romance that's been going on for a few stories already. Plus we have all the other people who are working for the agency who are drifting in and out of the plot. So it's a very sort of colorful cast of characters that we're playing with. It's all set in London, which is one of my favorite destinations to go to. So I greatly enjoy these books. They are incredibly quick, easy reads as well. However, because of that very unexpected and very badly explained twist at the end, like it felt a bit like a cop-out, like the easy way out is like, here, we'll throw something that has nothing to do with the story that we've been telling for the past 900 pages your way, and that's the ending of the book. And you're like, wait, what? So I was left wanting a lot more, and this book very much suffered from bad editing. This book could have been told in like 300, maybe 400 pages fewer than it actually was. So I gave this 3 stars, or 4. 4 still, because I do really enjoy the characters and I like this very much. But maybe now in hindsight, I would knock it down a star, because I'm like, was it really that good? It's definitely not the best one in the series, but because I like the series, I think I'm a bit biased. And then these books you will have seen because I read them during my trip to Florence. The first few days I got stuck in Mexican Gothic by Silvia Moreno Garcia, and I've mentioned this book a lot. This had been on my TBR for quite some time, and I finally got around to it, and it was the perfect fall read. It gave me Fall of the House of Usher meets something like more gothic-y, like some other books that I've read. This is set in Mexico, however, which I believe is the background of the author as well, but I believe she lives in Canada, if I'm not mistaken. But this is set in Mexico City, and our main character gets a letter from her cousin who is married into this very rich family, and her cousin requests her to come out to this house to pretty much help her. It's like a cry for help. And our main character is very sort of skeptical of what's going on. This family is very secluded and they don't really talk to anyone. And then as the plot unravels, The house unravels as well. So if you know the background of the fall of the House of Usher a little bit, then I think you can guess what might be happening here. But as the house deteriorates, the family deteriorates as well. I won't be giving away too much there because it's hinted at it for a very soon that the house and the family are somehow connected. And yeah, that's definitely something that's going on in this story. It was definitely a very good gothic-y read because this house that she travels to is like set on the top of a mountain, very secluded from everywhere. And the family was obsessed with like English aristocracy. So they very much built this English country home on a Mexican hill. And they were silver traders, so everything in the house is silver, which really greatly adds to the atmosphere. It's very sort of spooky and like this sort of like gothic fiction needs to have something unheimlich in it. That's the German word for it, which is like the English translation is uncanny, and that is what this story does very, very well. This was a great read. I really enjoyed it. I flew through it. Was it the best book I ever read? No, not necessarily, but I definitely did give it 4 stars out of 5 because this made me fall in love with gothic fiction all over again, and it's one of my favorite genres to read from. It's just that online, I find that it's very difficult to find good gothic recommendations because it's just not a genre that a lot of people talk about. It's just something I read a lot when I was a student for courses and stuff. But this definitely fits into the whole like gothic kind of vibes, and I loved it. So Mexican Gothic by Silvia Moreno Garcia. If you want a good gothic read, this is definitely one. And then I took another book with me on that trip because I figured it was a shorter book, so I would probably get to another book very soon. So I read Bunny by Mona Awad, which my neighbor actually recommended to me, who read it as well. And this was such a quick, easy read that it's almost distracting from some of the problems that the plot has. So this book, again, I did really enjoy it. It was a 4-star read for me. And we follow a main character in this story who goes to a very exclusive creative writing program at a very prestigious American university. And our main character becomes part of a group that she has always regarded as being strange. They are sorority girls who call themselves Bunny. And she becomes a bunny. She has somehow accepted into this group, and we follow her initiation in this group, and there are some very gruesome details that go into this. There is an element of body horror that is in there. There's literally flying limbs in this story. If you don't like gore, you're not gonna like this. But we definitely find, especially in the second half of the book, I feel, that a lot of the pacing is lost and certain lines are added to this story that, to me, didn't always make sense as much as I wanted to. And this is all explained in a major plot twist at the end, where we find out that, hey, is our main character really a reliable character? Can we trust what she has told us? But it takes you until the last page to get there. So I felt the first half of this book was very well done, but then once she becomes a bunny, it's almost like there's no agency in the story anymore that really drives the narrative forward. So that's why I felt the second half of the book wasn't as great as the first half, and that really knocked it down a star for me. But I greatly enjoyed it. If you want a very fast-paced, slightly gory read, give this one a try. And then the book, why I ended up taking so long to tell you about the books I had read, is Holy Sister by Mark Lawrence. This is the third and final book in the Holy Ancestor trilogy. I think that's what it's called. And I read the first 2 and really enjoyed it. It was fast-paced and very enjoyable. So I picked this up thinking, I'm going to love this as much as the first 2, and I'm going to fly through it. And that didn't happen. And I know exactly why this happened. It's a multiple POV story, but the multiple POV we get in here jumps storylines with the same character. Which, to me, really took the flow out of the story, because we get a storyline that follows the storyline where the second book leaves us. So at the end of the second book, it ends on quite a bit of a cliffhanger. And rather than like picking up the story where we left off, we get a chapter from, in this storyline, the past, like right after book 2, and a storyline that is current day in the story, with a war brewing. And because we need to bounce back and forth between these storylines, I felt that it was incredibly difficult to follow what we were talking about, who we were talking about, and I felt it really took away from the action, whereas all of the other stories were a little bit more linear and it was more of like a chronological order, which doesn't mean that I don't like things like I don't mind things like flashbacks and like storylines that go back and forth at all, but this felt so disjointed, as if there were like 2 stories going on at the same time that I had to follow. And with how much I've been not doing great in November, I was very tired and busy and sore, and things just weren't going great for me, meant that I didn't have the energy or the mental capacity after a day at work to be getting stuck into a narrative that went from, this was 3 years ago, and this is right now. This was 3 years ago, and this is right now. And every single time I was fed just a piece of the story, that's also how I ended up reading it. I would read a piece of the story and then another piece of the story. So for me, if I were to reread this ever, I probably won't. I would first read all of the chapters that that tell the first storyline, and then I would read the chapters that tell you the other storyline, because I didn't feel that the going back and forth really added anything except for taking the pace out of the narrative. So I forgot what I was talking about with this story because my camera battery ran out and I'm running out of daylight, so I want to finish up. But yeah, we follow Nona in this story, who becomes an assassin nun, and it sounds really exciting, and at this point in time she has sort of earned her stripes for the most part, and she's sort of living her best assassin life. But at the same time there is a war going on, and that's where I felt the story became very convoluted. There were characters who were saved who didn't need saving, I felt, as well. Like, the wrong characters were killed off for sure. And there was just a lot of unnecessary plot that it wasn't a very long book, which is why I thought I would fly through it. It's only 300 pages and a bit. So it's a short read, but it just didn't have great pacing. So for me, I think, what did I do with this one? Let me see, how many stars did I give it? I still gave it 3 stars, because as far as like a conclusion to the story, it worked, but I wanted something else from this for sure. And finally, the thing that solved a lot of my issues was this. This is Travis Baldry's The Legends and Lattes, and I had heard so many people raving about this online that I was like, you know what, I'm gonna give it a whirl. And I think I bought this with a gift card earlier in the year, and I was like, you know what, I'll give it a shot. It's a cozy fantasy. It says here at the front, high fantasy, low stakes, good company. And this is a genre of fantasy that is really sort of up and coming, and I think this was the book that like instigated it for a lot of people, where we get a fantasy setting, and it's not about like wars and beating the enemy and nothing like that. This is about an orc who used to kill people for a living and who's decided to retire and start a coffee shop in a place where nobody has heard of coffee. And it's definitely cozy. It's a ragtag band of characters that come together to build this coffee shop and that try to make it a success, with some old enemies in the background who try to sort of make sure that doesn't happen. But essentially, this was like just over 300 pages. It wasn't even 300 pages, because look at this. This is what happens all the time. So here we have the end of a chapter, right here, and then we get an empty page, and then we get the next chapter. So I flew through this. I read this pretty much in a day. If I had had more time last Sunday to read, I could have read this in one sitting. It's very quick paced. It's very fast. It's a very fast read. It's cozy for sure. If you need a palate cleanser because you want something that's easy to read and get into, and you just sort of want something that's not as like high stakes as other things, this is lovely. But as much as I see why people like this, I also see why this just is not a good book. This is something where I really doubted as I was reading who decided to okay this, because this reads like fan fiction. This reads like fan fiction. It's very process heavy, like plotline wise. I think about 3/3 of the book of the entire plotline is them building this coffee shop. And all of the processes, all of the steps, and all of the people who are coming in to make this coffee shop a success. And then something happens at about 2/3 of the novel, and then they sort of need to redo the whole system again. So to me, it just felt a little like I want more stakes in my plot line, you could say. I want there to be a little bit more excitement. This almost had like too little of a plot, I felt. It was very sort of process heavy. It was all like, these are the steps you need to make a coffee shop in a fantasy setting. That's pretty much what we got. That is why it reads fast, also because the pages, like this has a very generous type spacing, like, what's it called? Typeface. So it was a very quick and easy read. Did I enjoy myself while reading it? Yes, for sure. But I think there could have been done more with this story. There are all these underlying undertones and themes that the book just never really goes into. So there's a theme of love and friendship and like lovers past and friendships that are left behind, and everything is sort of like glanced over and then we move on. We glance over it, like it happens, and then we move on. Like there's no sort of like deeper meaning to things for characters. They never really contemplate the choices that they make. So I definitely felt that there was just so much more that these characters could have done. And it was all just like little plans. And that's why I said it reads like fan fiction to me, because that's something that I found a lot in mediocrely written fan fiction. And this reads like it. It's like someone was a fan of something like Legends of Zelda and decided to give one of the main characters a coffee shop, or World of Warcraft, and decided to write a story about it. That's how it reads to me. Which, again, nothing wrong with that. If that's something you really greatly enjoy, definitely go for it. For me, I just felt that I would have wanted a little bit more in-depth insights into these characters than what the book gave me. Then I would have liked it better, but for the pacing and the fact that this was just a fun read, it's still worth 3 stars in my book. So there you have it. Those were my thoughts on the 6th book I last read. I am currently at a grand total of 36 books read in 2023, which is a lot better than I have done in the previous 2 years, which I greatly enjoy. I'm already thinking of starting this as my next read. So this is The Long Way to a Small Angry Planet, a bit of sci-fi by Becky Chambers, which I'm very much looking forward to. It is very small though. Like this, the typeface on this is very small, and it's like 400 pages. So this might take me some time to read, but we are still in the early days of September, of course, like midway through, and I do have Christmas break in 2 weeks' time. So that's hopefully going to free up some more time to read. So maybe I can get it to 40 if I finish my audiobook and then maybe 2 or 3 physical copies. I might be able to make it to 40. We'll see how it goes. But yeah, I definitely did read a couple of very enjoyable books this time round, and let me know in a comment down below what you have been reading. I would love to know. And then I hope to see you in my next video. I will see you again next week. Bye-bye.